Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday night as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, internets, and welcome to That's Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, joined as always by David Rios.
Hey, Dan.
And we would normally have some other guests with us, however, they're not feeling well, so Jose is taking the night off. But we will have him back next week, we hope. So tonight's going to be kind of a light topic, something we talk about at the top of every show, and that is our influences. So the media we intake and how that can affect our voice, style, tone, all that kind of fun stuff. So we'll get to learn about the history of Dave and I, what media we liked, what we grew up on, what we think inspired us to choose creative paths, and all that fun stuff. But I guess staying on theme and getting into what is currently influencing you, this last week, David, what have you been reading, watching, playing, anything of the sort?
I've been still focusing on some of the Krakoa stuff. I trying to keep up with some of the Agatha Harkness stuff. And picked up rewatching the Rings of Power series.
Yes, I'm also into that. I've been following it pretty staunchly this season.
Yeah, I watched some of it, bits and pieces of it last season. Now that the second one is almost complete, I started rewatching the first, but it's like I get about an episode.
Sure.
Maybe one or two a week.
Yeah,
it's not a lot of time. I also picked up, haven't had a chance to play it yet, but the new Zelda game.
Nice.
So I'm kind of looking forward to that, and hoping I can pull some time here and there to do it.
Yeah.
But Reading, games, movie stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much pretty
Okay.
much it.
Sounds good. I'm also watching Rings of Power. I'm one episode behind at this point, but yeah, I would say season 2 definitely flows a lot better than season 1 did. But it's such a meaty show that I think giving it time to breathe between episodes does help it a lot, because it is very Tolkienian in the way that it takes a while to describe things and get places. And
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
and I feel like if you try to binge that too much, you're going to end up. I feel like it get easy to burn out because of how long it takes to
Yeah,
set up things. Yeah.
I find it, I kind of go back and I think about a lot of the shows, and you look at a lot of the content for the shows nowadays, and they're
Mm-hmm.
30, 40 minutes. Some, if it's considered a long episode, it's in the 49-minute kind of range.
Yeah.
But the Rings of Power is an hour and 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I never really kind of sat back and thought that extra, 10 to 20 minutes really makes it a lot longer. And,
Yeah.
For me to, one of the things was a good time for me to kind of watching, TV or anything like that is, whenever I'm, eating or something like that. I'll try to get up and go kind of sit down, throw a half-hour episode of something on while I'm eating, and then, go back and do whatever I'm doing. A little harder with full hour or hour and 3 minute ones.
That's the same problem we have. We were contemplating putting it on before we were going live tonight, and then no, we didn't have the time. So I just thrown what I've been watching, which is Bleach: 1,000-Year Blood War.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of working to get caught up since the new season starts on Saturday. And that having, I have to have I don't know if you do this at all. It's something I do, and I know a few other people who are interesting individuals do. But you have to have 3 drinks. You have to have your hot drink, your cold drink, and then your hydrating drink.
Okay.
When you're working on something, I feel like I have to have 3 shows, like my long show, my short show, and then my background noise show. So I can, well, depending on the situation, I can throw whatever it is I'm currently watching through on.
Well, that's interesting that you're saying that. Because my wife, she has a very hard time just sitting there in the quiet.
Yeah.
So, she'll be doing her work and all this stuff, but just having some kind of background noise, otherwise I think, I don't know if it's calming or if she's staring at me right now. If it's kind of weird, but having that going on in the background actually helps her concentrate more.
Yes.
Because it's not a white noise era blank area, or everything, the cat's knocking something over or the cat's getting into stuff is not drawing her attention away. So as long as she has a repetitive noise in the background, then that keeps her going.
That's I don't know if she has ADHD, but I do, and that's actually an ADHD self-medication, because it's a dopamine deficiency, and so completing a task does not give you dopamine. But if a task is handed to you or done for you, you can get a little hit of dopamine. So if you have a show that you're going on the background or something on the background, it gives you just enough of a dopamine hit to allow you to focus on the main project, which is sucking your dopamine. Yeah.
And for her, it needs to be something that she's watched or heard before.
Yes. Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's
distracting.
It sucks you in. So, but for me, I can get lost in the quiet for a while. Sometimes it's it can pull me in, even if it's something I've already watched. Kind of the only thing is that drives me forward is music. I can have that going on, but any kind of auditory and visual input kind of can potentially pull me out. So
Yeah, that's I only no. I need to have something on my. The only time I don't have to have it like be something I'm racing if it's like a podcast, because then I know it's audio only, and they don't need to look at something. So if I have like a podcast, they'll put on while I'm painting or while I'm driving. If I'm doing like my daily commute. Only thing that sucks for that is writing, because writing, if you have like people talking at you, other words, they can get So I'll go to I'll go to a crowded coffee shop and let the talking happen in the background, because usually then that's enough separation. Or throw on some sort of instrumental rock like Archspire or God is an Astronaut is a really good one.
okay.
Yeah. I guess to get back into it, what I'm similar to what I'm watching, I'm currently reading the Bleach manga as well, going back, and because the original series was just so full of filler and unnecessarily long episodes. So to make sure that I'm fully caught up and fresh for the new season, I'm reading through the pre-existing Bleach content that happened back in 2004 to up until 2011. And then rewatching the stuff over the last year.
There you
Yeah.
go. Cool.
Playing wise, still bouncing between Final Fantasy 14 and Persona 5 because those are very long games. Final Fantasy 16 has been purchased on the PC and downloaded, so it's waiting to go. And Starfield just had its DLC release. So, and I already had that pre-ordered from last year, so that's I'll probably be playing after the show tonight.
Yeah, I still have the PS5 version of Final Fantasy 16 box still sealed over there.
Yeah. I mean, it's whenever you can get time to get to it. Like if you give yourself like when next time you get like a vacation where you can take your console with you, it's very solid game.
Yeah, I unfortunately I also have 15 that I hadn't.
Okay.
14 is one I played quite a bit. 11, obviously, because both of those with the role, the MMORPG. It's like that. Those ones I played for a while until I stopped having time to play
Nice.
them. But yeah, I've got some of those. Someday, I tell myself if I ever retire, that I'll have lots of stuff to play. I'll have lots of Lego sets to build and just a whole bunch of whatever.
Yeah, especially like the longer games where I feel like I need to take a vacation just to play a game.
Yeah, it's like I've heard you talk about Final Fantasy VIII a lot.
Yes,
and it's like I remember just sitting there and just playing and playing and playing and playing. I even had brought it over to a friend's house, and I was playing there, and just trying to go through that Diablo's fight.
Yes.
And get him. I just had such a hard time. But I'm kind of I'm not the shotgun to the end type guy.
Right.
I'm always about building everything up, and then it, which is weird because for the game that helps because it makes it easier because you walk into an area and you're like
you have your economizers, you have your Mahamushi blades.
Yeah, you're like 5 to 10 levels higher than the average than you would have been. But then when I look at like when I was playing like fighting games and stuff like that, I always would choose the harder characters the weaker ones. Like I
Sure.
would always gravitate to, in Final Fight, I'd always, play a girl character or whatever, just because I remember like Final Fight 2 I was playing, and I don't know if you've ever played that one, but
I'm not.
I had a friend and I was talking to him because I played the first Final Fight and, had a lot of fun, played a lot of time on it and all that stuff. Like I said, always playing the, more difficult where it took 2 or 3 hits, whereas if you were big, the main guy, you could do it in 1 hit or something like that. Just a lot more challenge and fight, and then I had a friend and he's like, like, oh, I have to get that. And he's like, don't waste your money. He's here, borrow mine. And a couple hours, I'm like, okay, I'll play as the main guy, and like in 2 hours, I beat the game. Because it was such a it was so skewed and different from the other game. Plus, I was dealing with a harder character, a character that hit harder. So it lost a lot of challenge for me. So 100%, I was glad that he let me the game. But I always try to I guess this does kind of tie back to the building and stuff. It's like I figure if you're paying so much for a game, stretch it out as much as possible.
Sure.
And then I also kind of equivalent. I said, all right, well, if I can go to the movies and I can go to the movies cheap, at the time it was $5. Sometimes we have discount ones for $6 or whatever. But I'm like, if say I just round it to $10 for a 2-hour movie, and I say that if I can get at least at least an hour for every $5 that I spend on the game, then it's worth it. And the more I spend time on that, farther I can get a lot more value out of it and everything. So I kind of hit that stride, and I try to play the games, and the ones that are like 3 hours, you pay $60, and you get 3 hours out of a game, you're done. It's just not very cost effective for me. So
if I pay full price for a game, I'm definitely wanting to like fill like a week. Like if I get like 2 hours or whatever at the end of like a work day or whatever, like I want a game to fill like at least like a couple of weeks of that.
Mm-hmm.
But now being at the point where you're not sure if you get those 2 hours. Like if I get a game for a couple bucks on Steam on sale, like if I get like a 20-hour to 30-hour story that's like linear, it's through, it's boom, 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 and you're done, and I can move on to the next thing, mark off my library, then it feels great because I'm just like, yeah, I actually had a game that I had time to play.
Yeah, and and to the point, it's like you got like 20 hours in the game, you got a decent amount of time out of that.
Yeah. So I guess we can use this kind of point as a jumping off for how our experience of media affects our journey into comics. I feel like I kind of have that same philosophy almost going into comics now, where paying $5 to $7 for a floppy, or as opposed to waiting for the trade to come out and spending like 20 or odd or whatever it is, depending on the vendor. And you're getting like a full day's experience with it as opposed to having to wait and pop, and honestly probably forgetting about the next issue's release. Just go and trade a trade. I feel like I get that's the same kind of investment seeking that I have when I'm looking at comics. I feel like my time with games media has definitely influenced that value seek.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess as a jumping off point then, one of the games we obviously talked about was Final Fantasy, both being like very important to both of us. And we mentioned on previous episodes about how Final Fantasy is a series both really hits on the storytelling and visual elements just incredibly well in almost every iteration. Especially I can't remember the name of the artist, but the artist who does the cover art started in Final Fantasy IV. But
Amato?
Yes, yeah. But almost every element of that game is iconic in every iteration to someone somewhere, and just general great across the board. So when I think about characters that I love and the time spent in dialogue and the slow moments, you like giving your story slow moments to get to know those characters, thinking about um, uh, Squall and Cypher in Balaam City, or um, the Golden Saucer scenes in Final Fantasy VII, like the date scenes in the Golden Saucer, or Final Fantasy X and the laughing on the beach, right? It's kind of like these little slow moments that don't really action, they don't really drive the main plot, but you give a moment for a character to express their desires or the wants with another one, and then you still go through some sort of change because every scene in the story has changed, right? But
Yeah, like the how was it the dancing scene in 8 with
yeah,
it was I yeah, it just kind of lends a good feeling and a good added storyline for it.
absolutely.
Just just kind of helps absorb you into it. So
Yeah, and I feel like those characters would not be as beloved as they are if they did not have scenes like that. So when I think about writing characters in my comics now, I always want to have some sort of slow scene where you get to know and understand these characters a little bit more. But only 22 pages and like a limited run in the volume, that can be a little rough. Wolf Hunter was kind of hard because I had to find ways to squeeze those in. But I feel like that influence there definitely is a major part of how I think about creating characters or writing character moments. For yourself, would you say that like Final Fantasy has influenced like your art style or like your color style? Has it like um, do you sometimes like think of iconic palettes and like, oh, I could borrow from this or I could recreate part of that or something like that? It could even be subconscious if you can't really think about that, like an active pursuit.
well, for me, on kind of influence and stuff from Final Fantasy as an example is I always used to love the amount of detail and everything that went into all of the summons and the casting of the spells and all that stuff. So a lot of times when it comes to effects and things like that, I like to put a lot more into that. I remember back when I was doing some of the stuff at Marvel, I had I've referenced before there's a couple things. First of all, when I had I was doing an X-Men Brood book, and the I wanted to put a lot of detail into the Brood, and I started playing around with all kinds of textures and effects to get their skin tone to kind of, to me, they looked like a lot like they were based off the Xenomorph, the alien character. Um, in some aspects of it, particularly in this book, it had a lot of that, that long sloping head, rounded look, as opposed to the traditional kind of triangular head that the Brood had before. And they had a lot of tentacles. It just reminded me a lot of it. So I went through and I made a lot of details in that. And then another thing I remember is I had a page where I was doing a crystal, and the crystal was lit up. So I put a lot of effects into the center of the crystal to give that glowing feel.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was a lot of kind of influence from a lot of the Square was doing a lot of taking all the effects and then just amping them up like crazy and putting all kinds of detail. I mean, if you think of I forget the name of the summon. It was the big summon. It was. Could I not remember this? It was the Knights of the Round summon, for
Oh,
example,
yeah,
and all of the detail with all the knights and every knight hitting with a different strike and all this stuff. And then I think it was 8. Was it the Eden summon?
mm,
The whole big where it just came
yeah,
in. You have this big bowl and all of the designs, and it's like rotating around, and
yeah,
it's just all of that detail and all that. It does kind of drive when I do effects, where I just don't want to. I could just throw a gradient here or something like that, but I always try to boost that up and put different things added to it, just kind of pop it out a little bit more.
absolutely, yeah. I think it's very similar. I feel like that. When you think about the franchise, detail kind of detail in the characters, detail in the art. That's kind of all. When I think of obviously like in general, I think of detail.
Mhm.
Multi, but there. I kind of to bounce away from games, maybe.
Mhm.
Uh, I guess we'll get into like just I'll ask you generally. Uh, do you find that when you are if you're just taking in a lot of something, or if you just like watch a lot of something, read a lot of something, or anything like that, um, I find this kind of happens actually in my dialogue sometimes, where I naturally start floating in the style of that material I just like read a lot of or watched a lot of or whatever. I imagine with coloring it might be a little harder to do so, but do you find that sometimes if you take a lot of something in, maybe you end up like falling into doing a lot of shadows similarly or stuff like that?
Well, yeah, that was one of the things that I commented on when did the Kalis covers. At the time, I was kind of following a lot of Art Germ's
Hmm.
artwork and his some of his videos that he had. So my traditional approach was always to drop a mid-tone in and then put shadows and highlights. But I watched on a lot of his stuff. He will put in all darks and then work his way lighter. Um, so when I went through and, at the time, it was like, well, I'm going to try this on the cover. And, it also kind of made sense because, the two covers that I did were both outside in the dark. So it did kind of lend itself to doing um, some darks and and things like that. So yeah, that was definitely something that was influencing me at the time. Um, I also I know that a lot of what Roland likes is compared to a lot of the stuff that that I was doing was he doesn't. I don't want to say he doesn't like, but it's a more subtle, um, not a lot of hard striking. Like for example, you have a black, you have a black glove on. If you look at some of the stuff like David Nakayama stuff, um, it gets that really really glossy look and feel because he has a lot of just sharp whites
Yeah.
to give that look and feel of it's maybe a vinyl or something like that. And with Roland stuff, I try not to do that. I did push the envelope on a few things, and he's maybe pull it back a little bit, but you know getting the more subtle highlights and shadows is more of doesn't want a lot of that striking thing.
Hmm.
So sometimes I do get in the thing where if I'm looking at a lot of colorists that do that, I do tend to kind of fall into that a little bit, but I try to keep with Roland stuff a little more subtle. and I tend to brush in the shadows and cut in highlights and things like that, so it's not line right next to each other. But yeah, that's just different ways that I do it.
Yeah.
But that influence does, when you come in and you see something, sometimes I just want to take something and play around and drop in a huge high contrast, like a black with a super bright purple,
Right.
Just to get a feel. But I don't regularly do that with the stuff I do here.
I'm similarly influenced by like similar art styles, like especially with comics. I like, Roll and I differ on this. Is that I am a fan of kind of the more modern, hyper rendered style look on some things. I think for some things it can be overdone, but for the most part, I like the added depth it gives every scene. Right, that's one of my favorite parts of Thousand Year Blood War is the fact that they do a lot of mood rendering. Right, so a lot of the combat scenes aren't going to be working highlight to low light; they work blue light to red light in terms of the shadow work, and I think that is a fantastic choice. But so similarly, when I do my painting, it's very high contrast comic-y as opposed to focusing more on like subdued details. I want everything to scream at you from across the table.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I see a lot of the miniatures that are done. I see a lot of people that mix in. They do a lot of maybe coppers, or actually introduce like a lot of like dark red in with the coppers, and then they counter that with sharp blues.
Yes.
Or the highlighted glows with the the bright greens. So you see a lot of that contrast, and when you were talking about the styles and all that stuff before you lifted up your miniature, I was like thinking, yeah, I can understand from you from a like I said, you're mainly a writer, but you do the painting of these figures on the side. That would be a big outlet for you to play around with your palettes and your mood for the characters and stuff. So
yeah, if nothing else, it's just a way to validate the hundreds of dollars I spent in acrylic.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I find that because of I don't know if it's just my brain or if it is like where it can be so much more apparent for writers because of the way you can think in words and then it gets stuck in your brain and then that'll affect the words you put on page. I think maybe it's like you can get affected by your recent influences the equal amount either in art or in writing. It's just maybe in writing it stands out a little bit more because if someone says the same exact thing as on a TV show, people can recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like because of that, I have to be really intentional with the material I take in when I'm working. So that way I'm staying on theme, right? So with Wolf Hunter, all I did was read and watch World War II era stuff, and Jean Le Carre novels, was it the Ukrainian Inspector, like stuff like that, where I have to like get really into spy dialogue and spy pacing and understanding how to like to tell enough to burn in the story without and the fact that like when you're doing that kind of story, like the fact that like more is more when it comes to description because you can use scene setting and description to push people away and send them off in the wrong direction. Like being okay, it's okay to lie to your audience. And learn and like taking in all these other pieces of written work where that is the type of dialogue and the type of description being given. So then it flows out of me naturally, and I don't feel like I'm like when you're writing a space opera or whatever, you're going to be spending a lot less time in description and more time maybe in monologuing or action sequences. and you can't really do one and the other because otherwise you end up clashing and changing the pacing in a way that doesn't work.
Okay, so I have a question for you then, based off of this.
Okay.
So, say you're working on say you're working on a superhero book or something like that, and you get a reference, like maybe you're watching, some string of anime that's more, you know, more serious, sad, just something not quite in the Grave of the Fireflies type thing, but something that's overall you're dealing with something that's more maybe sad and all that stuff.
Last couple seasons of Attack on Titan, something like that.
Okay. If you get in that mood and you're flowing in that area, would you say, all right, I need to stop the superhero and I need to work on another project that's maybe based on that? I mean, obviously, timeline guidelines
Right.
and all that will dictate, but I'm saying, if you have the free time and everything, would you go and try and move into a more appropriate storyline? Maybe it's a new storyline you're developing, or would you say, all right, I want to take a few bits and elements of this and inject it into this superhero, to maybe get a little depth on the characters? What would you generally prefer to do?
I think it depends on where I felt the story had been so far. Like if it's like an issue 1 and this is like a brand new thing and I don't want it overall to have that tone, I would maybe move to creating something else in the meantime, because your issue 1's going to set the tone for the rest of the book, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's something I've been working on for a little bit, I did this with the story I've already written, which hopefully gets their first issue out next year. If I've already written something and I feel like this is, and I look back and I'm like, oh, this has been all upbeat, or this has been all this other mood, and I have a chance to round out this character in a moment or a sequence that isn't going to dictate the rest of the story, but is going to live in this moment and like can have some severe consequences going forward for how they interact when they go back to that same place. I might stick around and inject it. I did that with I got into watching what was it? I wasn't really watching it. I think was it Bridgerton? It was a weird political drama type deal. Where I was being subjected to it by being in the same room.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm like, oh, this character has like there's space in here for there to be like politics, or there would be like a politicking scene, or like oh no, it was we're watching. Well, I can't remember it, but no, but yeah, I lost it entirely because it wasn't my show, but yeah, I wanted to inject some politicking into it. And like, there's going to be like a lot, like some downbeat stuff where we can pull on these characters that were like in like have like a Congress scene. Now we can move to the first issue, and it's going to exist at the back end of this issue, and then we can then pull it forward to have more in-depth politicking when we get to this point where I'm writing it now. And pulling the strings that we set up that feel like they're setting up strings we pulled that aren't necessarily just the main plot, but give you multiple lines of intrigue as you read through issues 1 and 2 to then in issue 3 pull on some of them in ways you weren't expecting. So if I find a way to do that where it's allowing me to pull on different strings or set up different strings or to create a rounded moment for a character, I'll inject it. But otherwise, like, if it's a moment where like if I'm writing an action sequence, or I'm writing the more like mystery romantic sequence, and then I go into like watching the hills have eyes. I might go like, I'm going to put this somewhere else because I'm not sure I need paranormal child murder mystery at the moment.
So, also along that line, have you ever taken something where you start with an idea? Let's go back again to this idea of you're either somebody tasks you or you decide, hey, I want to do a superhero book. But have you gone where in had a case similar where maybe you've been watching something like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter or Gotham by Gaslight or something like that, where you said, all right, I had a direction that I wanted, or maybe I wasn't quite tied in exactly what I wanted to do, and maybe that thing shifts what you want to do with this team. Maybe now all of a sudden, instead of creating your Justice League, maybe you're dealing with your All-Star Squadron or something that maybe the influence of a different time period comes in, and you change your superhero team around towards whatever influence that you're soaking a lot of up at the time. Have you ever had any instances of that
Yes.
where you
That
kind of change?
was Soul Ascendant. The original influence of that was a lot of, besides Roman mythology, the original influence was a lot of Destiny 2. As it's going to be a lot of just like high science fiction, a lot of action, very high concepts. And that's still all in there, but then I got really into the Expanse, and having a lot of taking time to explore the science of space and injecting elements of supernatural mystery into it. Changed the entire direction of the book and where it was going, because I realized it was one-dimensional as it sat, but it needed to have those additional elements and influences thrown in there to make it feel fully alive and like an actual universe, and not just something that existed for these scenes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd say, like, is there something like that happened with your work? Whether it be that like you were working on a page and then you see something, you're like, actually, no, this seems better, or anything like that, where you've had the influence to pivot in mid project.
I don't get a lot of that because a lot of the things are pretty much defined.
Sure.
So, obviously, if you're working on, say Spider-Man or whatever, I mean, unless it's where an artist creates a whole new costume and all that, you're pretty much defined on what you have. So you don't have a lot of room to play around
Sure.
with the characters and all that. And in the coloring, there's a lot of that. And also, like you said, when you're mapping out, like in the first issue, when you're writing it, you don't want to go too crazy, because that will dictate how the second book and all that goes. It's very similar with coloring, is unless you're in a unique environment, like an explosion or somebody goes into a wormhole or something like that, you're going to need to kind of maintain your consistency throughout. You don't want, if you have like, I think, for example, like Grendel, like the original Black and White Grendel series, a lot of it just took place on a roof, and it was a lot of conversation between Grendel and Argent. the last thing you want to do is have a lot of variation where they're sitting on the same rooftop, but in the beginning of the book, you have a lot of details that additional things in the background. Obviously, not with those characters because they're black and white or gray.
Sure.
But you don't want to have the same items appear very red in one instance and yellow towards the end of the book, because you don't have a lot of consistency there. The only time that you would play around with that is if you're trying to do a dramatic effect, like somebody, an anime where all of a sudden they start screaming and
Mm-hmm.
the expressions go and all that stuff. You can play around and add color on that, but overall you're kind of dictated by what's involved with the scene and all that. So you can't, unless you have a really, like I said, a really cool wormhole that allows you to throw all the colors out the wind, then there's a lot of kind of limitations that you have on what you can use. But I try to augment that with either details or if there's effects, putting more details in the effects and things like that. So those things I kind of play around with, but I still have a lot of confines to what the consistency of the whole overall book is. So
Yeah, I guess it also depends on the style of coloring and illustration. There's a lot of American and Western comics are going to be very kind of like you'll have maybe like wiggle room in like the highlights and lowlights and other things like that. But for the most part, it's going to be kind of almost literalistic in its interpretation of like this is a red character, so therefore they're going to be red all the time or whatever. Or like skin tone is skin tone. But like with Wolf Hunter, we did it as the style of a Euro comic, like some like French comics from the 70s and 80s, where the coloring is purely emotive. Like color's made up, nothing is real. Like the color presents the scene. So being able to do flashes of red or make the sky shot green or something like that, I guess depends on the project you're working on. So yeah, I guess if you're a writer out there, give your colorist a chance to work on a Euro comic.
yeah, that is definitely something, and I'm seeing that a lot with like some of the Skybound books.
Yeah.
They're using a lot of their different coloring methods and stuff. And you kind of think about it. The last thing that you want to do is have your Gotham by Gaslight colored like an anime.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
the colors and everything all make the that makes the scene and the style. That contributes to the style. I wouldn't want to do. I mean, it's okay for a cover, doing those sharp white and things like that. But typically, in interior of the books, I wouldn't. I wouldn't go detailed on that, because that tends to do a lot of sensory, overkill.
Sure.
So I kind of attribute that to back in the 90s, when the computer 3D effects and things like that came. You at the time you were like, wow, because here's some cool technology. There was a Batman book, I think it was by was it Pepe? I forgot his last name, but it was a cool book in the fact that it was like really 3D render, it was computer generated and all, not like just computer colored type thing. It was computer generated and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when you go through and you look at it, though, there's a lot of stimulus on all the pages coming through. Sorry, I'm moving the camera here. So I think that's a big thing, and you do see that a lot in different series, and you can see the same series, like the X books that are relaunched, multiple times. They're in completely different styles. Some of them are highly painted. And a lot of newer ones have a lot of the color variations and things like the Krakoa books and all that. So you get a lot of different feels on the books based off of what's creative styles, both artwork and coloring.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I feel like the thing with like doing emotive color is you can't really all the stuff that does it well, is that it doesn't do it like out of line or doesn't just like run wild with it. It's you have your moments where you hit that like that emotive shock or that flash, or everything that happens like all falls within like the same color schema, right? You're not pulling anything like and going into like a different hue or a different like finish on the color. And that's something even with the like the new Krakoa stuff. Each book I feel like has a different like the I don't know if it's the right term, but working in TV commercials, it has like a different color grading, but it's all like locked in. They don't really differentiate from that, so your brain knows what to expect and doesn't fall out of comfort range. Mm-hmm. But like going from Corsairs with like a ton of highlights and like really bright colors and everything is very bubblegum, and then you go to X-Force and the use of low lights and shades of black. Very different styles and very different extremes into it, but just consistent in their own canon.
Yeah, a good. Sorry, I'm not not trying to go and push things towards the big M, but a good example of that is look at the feel with like the New Mutants book during the Krakoa era, and the X-Force books and stuff like that. You can see quite a bit of styles, and it's always been like they took a lot of that influence and kind of built a little bit off of the Sinkovich era when they first started. So yeah, a lot of books can dictate, and look across. I'm looking at the background, just the background here on Silverline, and just look at the different covers and the different styles of all the different books that are here. You look at I'm looking at Bay right now, and it's like very muted colors, but they're strong colors, but a lot of muted. And then I have Kalis over here down in the bottom that's got the really dark blue face with the orange reflective glasses, and so a lot of that on all the books really helps dictate and differentiate the books from each other. So
definitely. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I think we talk about how our influences we pull from them to do in our stuff we're working on now. But the thing is, like with our influences, like subconsciously we're pulling from everything we've ever been influenced by in our past. So even though we might be thinking directly of something, like we're pulling on stuff that we've seen like 30 years ago, and it's kind of exists in your brain of this is good, I like this, but you aren't necessarily thinking about how our brain is pushing that forward. So when you combine like previous influences, like Wolf Hunter, like Wolf Hunter is inspired by like the coloring was inspired by L'Enfant Lazare, which is like a French science fiction comic about child super soldiers. But that combined with then Martin's other influences in more modern comics and some more modern rendering, plus the story elements, create a more like a unique thing where like you can tell that like it falls in the same class as this comic, but it's unique in its own right, because even though everything is influenced by something, you're we'll get to the concept of pastiche here, but your brain is always combining it with other stuff in your own voice to create something unique.
Yeah, definitely, because otherwise, then you're just copying content, and
then you're an AI.
you're an A, then you're an AI. But it kind of goes back to the phrase, if I wanted something to be colored like so and so, I would have hired so and so to color it.
Yeah.
So it is. It's always a big influence. Definitely your influences, taking that and injecting it with what's appropriate for the content, and maybe your past mood and feelings, but also bringing in something that's a little more cutting edge, and filtering them together and coming up with something that makes stuff stand out on the page.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that applies obviously to writing too.
Yeah, that's like I forgot who it was. I think everyone says this to some degree, but I think it's Hemingway that said the diet for a good writer is read and write every day. And the kind of thing is like the more you read, the more you're going to have an understanding of what you think good is, and the more you're going to be able to pull and go forward from that. And the dialogue, you may be inspired by something as far as dialogue goes, but you learned what pacing is from some other book you've read in the past, and you've learned what action sequences should look like from some movie you watched in the past. And if you may not necessarily think about all these things, but your brain will naturally pull from them. So you end up getting a book. You'll end up getting it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I find it fun. You get Star Wars Acolyte, where you have the action of John Woo, the religious influences of like the Divine Comedy, and like the mystery plots from who wrote Murder on the Orient Express?
I'm not sure offhand who wrote it.
I've been listening to so many references right now that my brain's just kind of dead. Agatha Christie, that's right. We're gonna get like the mystery of like an Agatha Christie, like who done it, right? And you have like all these different things that, in theory, sound very wildly removed, but because they're all just sitting in someone's brain and their voice distills it down into their vision, you end up getting a more cohesive storyline.
Plus, you also take, you have the advantage of, saying, well, they did this and this worked, but that didn't work. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you can look at things like, when I look at Rings of Power, season 1, I can say, I don't like a lot of the pacing decisions they made, but I like the character moments, and I like the visual style, and I like the dialogue is just like very poetic, like very much in line with how Tolkien did his dialogue. And so then when I go to do my other stuff, and I say like, I want to do the dialogue in here, but I'm going to throw the pacing out, and that's going to be the lesson learned from that story that I ingested.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it is 9:05. Getting ready for closing thoughts. David, do you have anything in particular you wanted to hit on tonight that we didn't already hit on?
No, not really. Not related to this topic. So
okay.
I think we covered pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this is one I didn't even have notes for, because it's just the psychology of creation is something that I have been nerding out about since college. So this is a conversation that I want to have with everyone all the time.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So after this, I'm going to go play some Starfield and get some more science fiction mystery and intrigue popped in my brain. For Soul Ascendant issue 2 and all that fun stuff. I'd say you're currently working on Demon Cells and things like that. Is there any particular book influences that you find yourself naturally leaning towards when you're working on your current project, or has there been a project in your past where you've been working on something like, I want to see this because that looks like something I'm working on right now?
It's more influence. I'm kind of dictated by what's on the page. There's a lot of that's been laid out. It's just a matter of, do I want to play around with this or push this? It is more of that. I pretty much try and follow along with what I'm seeing on the page and go from there.
Okay. That's good.
But if I want to try, I get a lot of things, and unfortunately, not really a penciler, but I get a lot of things where I would like to branch out and do some things. It's just I haven't had time and all that. I like a lot of the mech stuff, so I like to kind of play around with that and some, I don't know, some other, well, not necessarily team book, but maybe single person story or something like that to play around with. But that involves character sketches and all that. But
Sure,
that's kind of a completely different. Then I can go through and really absorb and throw out influences that I've got. Now I just kind of use the influences to tweak and touch upon what what's dictated by the page.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. Okay. We will be back next week with a topic that I have on the calendar now that I should probably have in front of me.
That's almost every week. You got to go look that up.
Yeah. Let's see there. Okay.
But we understand that it's in a different calendar than you normally in. So.
Okay. Yes. Since next week we're getting into Halloween season. We're already in Halloween season. We've been celebrating Halloween since early last month, so we've already been fully decorated. But since the rest of the world is entering the Halloween season, next week we're going to be talking about how to create effective body horror. So all the joys about doing jump scares, gore, what colors should you do for someone's intestines being ripped out, that kind of stuff.
That all depends on how dead they are at the beginning, right?
Yes, exactly. But that'll be our topic for next week, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So yeah, if we don't have, I'm all tapped out, and Dave sounds like you are too. So I think we're be ending the stream here and wishing everyone a good night. So until next week, make mine Silverline.
Make mine Silverline.
Hey, I'm G-Rod. Make mine Silverline. You heard me.